Captain Richard Hale tore my photo ID in half over the first-class armrest. The torn halves hit my lap while he told me I was not cleared for seat 3A. His thumb smeared the seal on my credential sleeve, and Lena's boarding tablet flashed because that ID was tied to the aircraft's federal security hold. Until I cleared that hold from my encrypted phone, Gate B-17 could not release the jet. He had just ripped the one document connected to the system keeping this flight legal to depart. The paper made a dry sound when it tore. Small. Sharp. Final. The first-class cabin went silent around it. Champagne bubbles kept rising in a glass beside the window. A child 2 rows back stopped tapping his game screen. Lena Price, the flight attendant, stared at the pieces in my lap like she had watched someone cut a live wire. Hale did not notice her face. That was his first mistake. He only saw mine. Black woman. Plain clothes. No visible badge. No panic. I kept both hands where everyone could see them. My navy coat rested neatly across my knees. My phone stayed face down on the tray table. The secure screen beneath it was still active. 47 seconds remained before the hold timed out and alerted federal coordination. Hale leaned closer. His pilot's jacket smelled faintly of coffee and cold air from the jet bridge. "You expect me to believe this gets you into first class," he said. His voice carried just far enough. Enough for the businessman across the aisle to lift his eyes. Enough for Lena to press her lips together. Enough for the woman in 2C to start recording from below her scarf. I looked down at the torn ID. One half showed my picture. The other half held the last 3 digits of the verification strip. Hale had destroyed the bridge between the two. Not impossible to fix. Not harmless either. "Captain," I said, quiet enough that he had to listen. "You need to stop handling that." He gave a short laugh. "I decide who boards my aircraft." The cockpit door stood open behind him. Beyond it, instrument lights glowed blue and green in the dim front galley. A gate agent waited near the jet bridge entrance with a radio pressed to her ear. Her eyes kept moving from Hale to Lena's tablet. Something had already started spreading through the system. A delay code. A security flag. A question no one wanted asked over an open channel. Hale straightened and pointed toward the aisle. "Get your things." I did not move. The cabin air felt cold against my wrists. The leather seat creaked under me as the aircraft settled at the gate. Somewhere beneath us, ground equipment hummed. The world outside kept moving, but inside seat 3A, everything had narrowed to paper, breath, and a captain who thought authority meant volume. Lena stepped closer. "Captain, maybe we should verify before," I said. "She gets off," Hale snapped. That changed the cabin again. Not louder. Smaller. Tighter. I saw the gate agent lower her radio. I saw the businessman stop pretending not to watch. I saw Lena glance once at my phone. The timer had reached 12 seconds. I picked up the torn pieces and aligned them carefully on my palm. Then I looked at Hale. "You just destroyed federal property." His smile faded halfway. Then Lena's tab, the ringing from Lena's tablet cut through the cabin like a fire alarm nobody could ignore. Every head turned toward her. The sound was not loud, but it carried authority. Different from a passenger notification. Different from a boarding update. Hale looked irritated more than concerned. That lasted about 2 seconds. Lena glanced at the screen and the color drained from her face. The gate agent took 3 fast steps toward us. Her radio crackled at the same time. The overlapping sounds filled the front cabin. Hale held out his hand. "Give me that." Lena did not move. That surprised him. It surprised me too. She read the message once. Then again. Her eyes flicked toward my phone on the tray table. The timer had disappeared. The hold had escalated automatically. Somewhere beyond the jet bridge, somebody higher in the chain had noticed. Hale lowered his voice. "Lena." She swallowed. "Captain, operations wants this aircraft held at the gate." Silence followed. The businessman across the aisle slowly closed his laptop. The woman recording lowered her phone halfway but did not stop. Hale looked toward the cockpit, then toward the open aircraft door. For what reason? Lena hesitated. Another message appeared. Her tablet vibrated in her hands. They did not provide one. That answer only made things worse. Airline employees are trained to expect explanations. Missing explanations usually mean someone important does not want details shared publicly. Hale looked back at me. His jaw tightened. "What exactly did you do?" I folded the torn pieces of my ID together and slipped them into my coat pocket. "Nothing." The gate agent finally reached us. She was breathing harder than before. "Captain Hale, we have a request from airport security." "Then send them up." "They are already coming." The cabin became very quiet. The smell of coffee drifted from the galley. Ice shifted inside a forgotten drink. Somewhere near row 6, a seatbelt buckle clicked. Small sounds suddenly felt enormous. Hale crossed his arms. "Good." He looked directly at me. "This should clear things up." I noticed the gate agent avoid eye contact with him. Another detail. Another crack forming beneath the surface. Lena stepped closer to me. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for me to hear her. "Ma'am, is there something I should know?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I looked toward the aircraft door. "You should know this is no longer a boarding issue." She stared at me for a second. Then she glanced at the tablet again. Whatever she saw there made her step back immediately. Hale noticed the movement. "What did she say?" "Nothing, Captain." He did not believe her. Neither did anyone else. A uniformed airport officer appeared at the aircraft entrance. Then another. Their polished shoes reflected the overhead lights as they stepped inside. Several passengers exhaled in relief. They assumed the situation was ending. I knew it was just beginning. The lead officer spoke quietly with the gate agent. Neither looked at me. Neither looked at Hale. They both looked at a document on a handheld device. Then the officer's expression changed. He lifted his eyes toward first class. Hale straightened. Confidence returned to his face. He actually smiled. "Officers," he called. "Thank you for getting here quickly." The two officers exchanged a brief glance. Something passed between them. Recognition. Uncertainty. Maybe both. Then the lead officer started walking down the aisle. Not toward me. Toward Captain Richard Hale. And that was when his smile finally disappeared. The lead officer stopped 3 feet from Captain Hale and removed a small earpiece from his ear. Nobody in first class moved. The cabin felt frozen. Even the air coming from the overhead vents seemed quieter. Hale looked from the officer to me and back again. "Is there a problem?" he asked. The officer did not answer immediately. He checked the handheld device once more. The glow reflected across his face. Then he looked directly at Hale. "Captain, we need clarification regarding an incident involving a federal credential." The words landed heavily. Several passengers exchanged glances. Lena lowered her tablet but kept it ready. Hale folded his arms. The credential was suspicious. The officer's expression did not change. Was it verified before being destroyed? Hale hesitated. It lasted less than a second. Long enough. The officer noticed. So did I. The gate agent quietly stepped back toward the aircraft door. She wanted distance from whatever was coming next. Smart move. Hale pointed toward me. She refused to provide acceptable identification. I kept my hands folded in my lap. My coat still covered the torn pieces. The businessman across the aisle leaned forward slightly. He had stopped pretending to work 10 minutes ago. "Captain," the officer said carefully, "the issue is that the credential appears to have been active inside a federal tracking network." A small ripple moved through the cabin. Most passengers did not understand what that meant. They understood the tone. Hale laughed once. Short. Sharp. Defensive. "Appears." The officer looked down at his screen again. "That is why we are here." Another message arrived on Lena's tablet. The vibration buzzed loudly in the silence. She read it and inhaled sharply. That caught everyone's attention. Hale turned toward her. "What now?" Lena did not answer immediately. Her eyes moved from the screen to me. Then back to the screen. "Operations says a federal liaison has requested this aircraft remain secured." The cabin grew even quieter. A woman near the window slowly lowered her magazine. Somewhere farther back, a rolling suitcase tipped over and hit the floor with a dull thump. Nobody looked away from first class. Hale's confidence was beginning to crack. "Just a little." "Federal liaison," he repeated. "For what?" Lena swallowed. "No reason provided." Again. "No explanation. Only instructions." The officer shifted his weight. "Captain, do you still possess any remaining portion of the credential?" Hale reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small fragment of laminated plastic. The corner piece. The officer stared at it. Then he stared at Hale. "You kept part of it?" "As evidence." The answer sounded weaker than Hale intended. A faint smile almost reached my face. "Almost." The officer extended his hand. "May I see it?" Hale handed it over. The officer examined the fragment carefully. His eyes narrowed. Then he showed it to the second officer. Neither spoke. That silence said more than words. Lena noticed it too. Another mini-hook settled over the cabin. Something about that tiny piece mattered. More than anyone expected. The second officer looked toward me for the first time. Really looked. Not as a passenger. Not as a problem. As a person connected to something larger. His expression changed immediately. Recognition flickered across his face and disappeared. I saw it. So did he. He quickly looked away. Interesting. Very interesting. Hale caught the exchange. What is going on here? His voice rose slightly. The officer returned the fragment to his partner. Captain, we are trying to determine that. The aircraft door remained open. Beyond it, more movement appeared on the jet bridge. Dark suits. Not airline personnel. Not airport staff. The gate agent saw them first. Her posture straightened instantly. Lena followed her gaze. Then she stopped breathing for a second. Whatever was coming toward the aircraft had just changed everything. The first person through the doorway carried a black credential wallet. The man with the black credential wallet stepped onto the aircraft and the entire front cabin seemed to shift. Around him. He was not wearing a uniform. Dark suit. White shirt. No visible badge. Yet the two airport officers immediately stepped aside. That told everyone enough. The gate agent straightened her posture. Lena lowered her tablet. Even Captain Hale stopped talking. The man moved calmly down the aisle. His shoes made soft sounds against the carpet. Slow. Measured. Intentional. He never looked at the passengers. He never looked at the officers. His attention settled directly on me. The businessman across the aisle noticed it too. I saw him remove his glasses and sit back. The recording phone in row 2 dipped slightly lower. People were starting to understand that this was not a normal airline dispute. The man stopped beside my seat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he gave a small nod. Professional. Familiar. Ma'am, he said. Are you injured? The question hung in the air. Hale blinked. Injured? The man ignored him completely. I looked down at the torn credential pieces inside my coat pocket. No, he nodded once. Good. Lena's tablet vibrated again. She did not even check it this time. Her eyes remained fixed on the man standing beside me. The lead airport officer cleared his throat. Sir, we recovered part of the credential. The man extended his hand. The fragment changed hands. He examined it under the cabin lights. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That tiny reaction carried more weight than a speech. Hale noticed. Look, whatever this is, I was protecting my aircraft. The man finally turned toward him. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop. Protecting it from what? Hale opened his mouth. Then closed it. No answer arrived. The man slipped the credential fragment into his wallet. Interesting. He looked toward Lena. Did the passenger threaten anyone? No, refuse instructions. No, cause a disturbance. Lena shook her head. No, sir. Each answer landed like another stone. Hale shifted his weight. The cockpit lights glowed behind him. The open doorway suddenly looked much farther away. Another mini-hook settled over the cabin. The man had not asked a single question about me. Only about Hale. The businessman noticed it. So did the officers. So did Lena. The wrong person was being evaluated. The man looked back toward me. Do you still have the remaining pieces? I removed them carefully and placed them in his hand. He aligned the torn edges. His expression remained controlled. Professional. Yet something behind his eyes hardened. Thank you. Then he reached into his jacket and produced a second credential wallet. Not his own. He held it closed. Nobody could see the contents. Hale took one step forward. Can someone explain what is happening? The man finally faced him fully. Captain, before I answer that, I need you to answer one question. Silence. The hum of the aircraft systems filled the gap. A flight attendant farther back stopped moving completely. The man continued. Did you personally destroy this identification? Hale hesitated. Again. Too long. The officers noticed. Lena noticed. I noticed. Finally he nodded. Yes. The man closed the wallet in his hand. Thank you. That answer seemed to confirm something important. More important than the torn plastic itself. The second officer touched his earpiece. A message arrived. His eyes widened slightly. Then he looked toward the jet bridge entrance. More people were approaching. Not airport personnel. Not airline staff. Dark suits again. The lead officer saw them too. The man beside me followed their gaze and exhaled slowly. For the first time since he arrived, he looked concerned. Not for himself. Not for me. For something larger. Then he glanced toward the cockpit and said 4 words that changed everything. The operation is compromised. The words settled over the cabin like a sudden drop in altitude. The operation is compromised. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Most passengers did not understand what those words meant. They understood the reaction. The lead airport officer straightened immediately. Lena's eyes widened. Even Captain Hale stopped trying to defend himself. The man with the credential wallet turned toward the aircraft door. More people in dark suits were already moving through the jet bridge. Fast. Purposeful. Quiet. One of them carried a tablet. Another held a secure radio against his ear. None of them looked happy. The businessman across the aisle slowly closed his laptop completely. Whatever business he had planned for today no longer mattered. The cabin had become something else. A stage. A checkpoint. A problem. The suited man beside me lowered his voice. How much was exposed? I understood the question immediately. Only the credential, I answered. Nothing operational. He nodded once. That answer helped. Not enough. But some. Hale looked between us. Frustration was beginning to replace confidence. Would someone explain what is happening? Nobody answered him. That bothered him more than an accusation would have. People with authority often expect responses. Silence can feel worse. One of the newly arrived officials stepped into first class. He scanned the passengers carefully. Not nervous. Focused. Looking for something specific. That caught my attention. Then it caught the attention of the man beside me. Our eyes met briefly. He had noticed the same thing. The search had already started. Another mini hook settled into place. The real issue was no longer the torn credential. The operation itself mattered. The first official approached. Status, he asked quietly. Compromised but contained, the suited man replied. We think. We think. Those two words hung in the air. Nobody likes hearing uncertainty from professionals. The official glanced toward me. Then toward the open aircraft door. Then toward the passengers. His jaw tightened. Any indication? Not yet. Not yet. Another phrase nobody wanted to hear. Outside the windows, a baggage vehicle rolled slowly across the ramp. Sunlight reflected off its windshield. Everything beyond the aircraft looked normal. Inside felt completely different. The air smelled faintly of coffee and jet fuel drifting through the open door. Lena stood near the galley pretending to organize paperwork. She was listening to every word. So was half the cabin. Captain Hale finally stepped forward. If there is a security concern involving this aircraft, I need to know. The suited man turned toward him. You needed to know 15 minutes ago. The answer landed hard. Hale actually flinched. Just slightly. Enough to notice. The second officer received another message through his earpiece. His eyes immediately moved toward row 7. Then row 8. Then back toward first class. Interesting. Very interesting. The search pattern had changed. I followed it without turning my head. Someone on this aircraft mattered. Someone beyond me. Beyond Hale. Beyond the credential. The official with the tablet checked a list. Then checked it again. A bead of sweat appeared near his temple despite the cool cabin air. We have a timing problem, he said quietly. How bad? Worse every minute. The businessman noticed the exchange. So did the woman who had been recording earlier. Her phone was no longer raised. Now she simply watched. Waiting. The atmosphere felt heavier. More focused. The suited man beside me slipped the reconstructed credential pieces back into his wallet. Agent, he said softly. Do you recognize anyone unusual on board? It was the first time anyone had addressed me that way in front of the passengers. The first real crack in the cover story. Several heads turned instantly. Captain Hale froze. Lena froze. Even the officers looked toward me. I scanned the cabin once. Slowly. Methodically. Then my eyes stopped on a passenger who had not looked up even once since all of this began. And that worried me far more than the torn credential ever had. My eyes stayed on the passenger in row 8. He had not looked up once. Not when the officers arrived. Not when the aircraft was held. Not when the word agent was spoken out loud. He simply sat there with a newspaper folded across his lap. That alone meant nothing. The stillness meant everything. Most people react to tension. They stare. Whisper. Reach for their phones. He did none of those things. The suited man beside me noticed where I was looking. He followed my gaze without moving his head. Years of training showed in that small motion. Row 8, he asked quietly. Maybe. I kept watching. The passenger turned one page of the newspaper. Slow. Precise. Almost too controlled. Another mini hook settled over me. People who are nervous often move too much. People who are trained sometimes move too little. The official with the tablet checked his list again. Seat 8 Charlie, he said under his breath. The second officer heard him. So did I. Captain Hale looked completely lost now. He stood near the cockpit entrance while events moved around him. Nobody asked for his opinion anymore. Nobody needed it. Lena remained beside the galley. She looked from me to row 8 and back again. She was beginning to understand the shape of the situation even if she did not know the details. The passenger finally lifted his eyes. Only for a second. His gaze passed across first class. Across the officers. Across the suited officials. Then it landed on me. Just one heartbeat. Then it moved away. That was enough. He recognized the change in the cabin. He knew something had shifted. The suited man beside me adjusted his cuff. A tiny signal. The officials near the aircraft door immediately spread out. Casual movements. Nothing dramatic. One stepped toward row 6. Another remained near the exit. Passengers barely noticed. Professionals did. The hum of the aircraft systems filled the silence. A flight attendant farther back rolled a service cart 2 feet before realizing nobody wanted refreshments anymore. She stopped immediately. The businessman across the aisle watched everything with wide eyes. His laptop remained closed. His meeting schedule had become irrelevant. The official with the tablet approached me. Anything specific? He asked softly. No direct confirmation. I kept my voice level. Just instinct. He nodded. Good professionals respect instincts. Especially when they are backed by observation. Another message arrived on his tablet. He read it. His expression changed. Not fear. Recognition. We found the connection, he said. The suited man beside me looked up sharply. Are you certain? 98%. The number hung in the air. Not certainty. Close enough to matter. The passenger in row 8 folded his newspaper completely. That tiny action sent a ripple through the officials. He stood. Smoothly. Calmly. No rush. No panic. Several passengers moved aside to let him enter the aisle. He offered a polite smile to an elderly couple. Ordinary. Friendly. Exactly what he wanted to appear. Then he picked up a small carry-on bag. The second officer touched his earpiece. Movement, he said quietly. Nobody stopped the passenger. Not yet. The suited man beside me watched carefully. Wait. His voice was barely above a whisper. Timing mattered. The passenger started walking toward the front of the aircraft. One row. Then another. His expression remained relaxed. Too relaxed. Every official tracked him without making it obvious. Captain Hale noticed the attention and finally followed their gaze. Confusion crossed his face. Then realization. For the first time all day, he understood that the real story had never been sitting in seat 3. The passenger reached row 4 and suddenly glanced toward the open aircraft door. That single glance told us everything. He had just made a decision. And whatever it was, it changed the clock completely. The glance toward the aircraft door lasted less than a second. Most passengers never noticed it. Every trained person on board did. The suited man beside me saw it immediately. So did the officers near the exit. The passenger kept walking. Calm. Measured. Carry-on bag in his right hand. Newspaper tucked beneath his arm. He looked like a businessman trying to leave a delayed flight. That was the problem. He looked exactly how he wanted to look. The aisle seemed narrower now. The cabin lights reflected softly against the overhead bins. Nobody spoke. Even the passengers sensed something approaching. The man reached row 3. He slowed slightly when he saw the cluster of officials near first class. Not fear. Calculation. The official with the tablet stepped aside as if creating room. The movement appeared casual. It was not. Another mini hook settled over the cabin. Everyone was waiting for the same thing. The next decision. The passenger smiled politely. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was smooth. Friendly. Unremarkable. The kind people forget seconds later. He continued forward. The second officer touched his earpiece again. A new message arrived. His eyes narrowed. Then he looked directly at the carry-on bag. Interesting. Very interesting. The suited man beside me folded his arms. "Sir," he called calmly. The passenger stopped. Slowly. "Yes. Would you mind waiting a moment?" The smile remained. "Is there a problem?" Nobody answered immediately. Silence filled the space between them. The passenger glanced toward the open door again. Small movement. Big meaning. Outside, more personnel had gathered near the jet bridge entrance. None entered. None left. The aircraft had become a controlled environment. The passenger understood that now. His posture changed slightly. Not enough for most people to notice. Enough for me. The friendly traveler vanished for half a second. Something colder appeared underneath. Then it disappeared again. "I have a connection in Denver," he said with a light laugh. "I would rather not miss it." The businessman across the aisle almost smiled. Under normal circumstances, it would have sounded reasonable. These were not normal circumstances. The official with the tablet checked another screen. "What is your final destination?" The passenger answered immediately. Too immediately. "Denver." The official looked up. "Interesting." A pause followed. "Your reservation says Seattle." The smile froze. Just briefly. There it was. The first real crack. Lena saw it. The officers saw it. Even Captain Hale saw it. The cabin seemed to inhale collectively. The passenger recovered fast. I misspoke. Nobody believed him. The suited man beside me stepped forward one pace. "Please place the bag on the floor." The request sounded polite. It was not optional. The passenger looked at the bag. Then at the open aircraft door. Then at me. For the first time since standing from his seat, uncertainty entered his eyes. Another mini hook tightened the atmosphere. He was evaluating exits. Not luggage. Exits. The lead officer moved slightly closer. Not aggressive. Not threatening. Just present. The passenger finally lowered the carry-on. Carefully. Too carefully. The official with the tablet exchanged a look with the suited man. They both noticed. Captain Hale remained silent near the cockpit. Gone was the certainty from earlier. Gone was the authority. Now he looked like everyone else. A witness. The bag rested on the carpet. The passenger removed his hand. The second officer received another transmission. This time his expression changed completely. He looked toward the suited man and gave the smallest nod imaginable. Whatever confirmation they had been waiting for had finally arrived. The suited man exhaled once and looked directly at me. "Agent Brooks," he said quietly. "I think we just found him." The word settled over the cabin and seemed to absorb every other sound. "I think we just found him." Nobody moved for a second. The passenger stood beside the carry-on bag with his hands relaxed at his sides. Too relaxed. The officers remained calm. The suited officials remained calm. That was the difference between preparation and surprise. The passenger looked from face to face. Measuring. Calculating. Looking for weakness. He found none. The businessman across the aisle slowly leaned back into his seat. Lena stayed near the galley. Her tablet remained pressed against her chest. Captain Hale stood frozen near the cockpit entrance. The authority he carried earlier had vanished completely. Now he watched events unfold like everyone else. The suited man beside me stepped toward the bag. "Please step back, sir." The passenger smiled again. Smaller this time. Less convincing. "This seems excessive." Nobody answered. The silence felt deliberate. The official with the tablet checked one final notification. Then he locked the screen. That tiny gesture told me something important. They had enough information now. Another mini-hook tightened the atmosphere. The investigation phase was ending. Decisions were beginning. The passenger looked toward the aircraft door once more. Outside, additional personnel waited near the jet bridge entrance. No one rushed forward. No one raised their voice. Everything remained controlled. That seemed to bother him more than confrontation would have. He wanted uncertainty. He wanted confusion. Instead he found structure. The lead officer moved beside the carry-on. "Sir, we need to inspect this item." The passenger shrugged lightly. "Go ahead." Easy answer. Too easy. The officer glanced at the suited man. They shared a brief look. Then the bag was placed on an empty first-class seat. Every eye followed it. Even passengers who had tried to avoid the drama were watching now. A flight attendant farther back stopped pretending to organize supplies. The cabin lights reflected off the metal latch. The officer opened the first compartment. Papers. Chargers. Travel items. Ordinary things. The businessman frowned. Several passengers exchanged uncertain looks. The passenger noticed. Confidence returned to his posture. "Satisfied?" he asked. No response. The officer continued searching. Another compartment opened. More ordinary items. Nothing unusual. A small wave of tension passed through the cabin. Had they been wrong? Had the entire aircraft been held over a mistake? Captain Hale seemed to think so. Hope appeared on his face for the first time in nearly an hour. Then the officer paused. His hand stopped inside a narrow side pocket. The movement was subtle. Tiny. Important. He slowly withdrew a second phone. Not powered on. Not listed with the other electronics. Not visible during the initial search. The cabin became silent again. The passenger's smile disappeared. Completely this time. The official with the tablet immediately stepped forward. "There it is." The words were quiet. They carried enormous weight. The suited man beside me exhaled slowly. Relief mixed with concern. Confirmed the serial number. The official checked his screen. His eyes widened. Then he nodded once. No celebration. No dramatic reaction. Just confirmation. Professional and final. The passenger looked toward the open aircraft door again. Not because he expected escape. Because he understood what had just happened. The path ahead had narrowed. Lena stared at the second phone. Captain Hale stared at me. For the first time all day, he seemed to realize how badly he had misunderstood the situation. The torn credential. The delays. The officials. The operation. None of it had ever been about a seat assignment. The lead officer carefully secured the device. Another message arrived through an earpiece. He listened without speaking. Then he looked directly at the suited man. We have one more problem. The cabin seemed to tighten around those words. The suited man frowned. What kind of problem? The officer glanced toward the cockpit. The device transmitted something before we found it. The words hit the cabin harder than the discovery of the phone itself. The device transmitted something before we found it. Nobody spoke. The hum of the aircraft system suddenly seemed louder. The lead officer removed his earpiece and listened again. His expression remained controlled. That worried me more than panic would have. Professionals stay calm when situations become serious. The suited man beside me folded his arms. When? He asked. Approximately 7 minutes ago. 7 minutes. My eyes moved toward the open aircraft door. 7 minutes ago was almost exactly when the credential had been destroyed. Almost exactly when attention shifted away from the operation and toward me. A coincidence? Maybe. Maybe not. Another mini-hook settled into place. The timing was too clean. The passenger stood quietly beside the searched bag. His confidence had vanished, but not completely. Something remained. A small reserve of certainty. The kind people carry when they believe part of their plan still worked. The official with the tablet reviewed incoming information. His fingers moved quickly across the screen. We are tracing the destination. The suited man nodded. Status? Incomplete. Nobody liked that answer. Lena certainly did not. She stood near the galley gripping her tablet with both hands. Captain Hale remained near the cockpit. Silent. Watching. Learning. For the first time since boarding began, he was listening more than speaking. The lead officer received another transmission. He turned slightly away from the passengers. Understood. A pause followed. Send everything. He lowered his hand. The signal reached an external receiver. The businessman across the aisle frowned. Even he understood enough to know that was bad news. Outside the window, airport vehicles continued moving across the ramp. Workers loaded baggage. Fuel trucks rolled past. Ordinary scenes. Ordinary sounds. Yet inside the aircraft, every second felt heavier than the last. The passenger finally spoke. I would like a lawyer. His voice was calm again. Not confident. Controlled. The request changed. Nothing. The officers exchanged brief glances. The suited man simply nodded. You will have that opportunity. The passenger looked at me. Really looked at me this time. No disguise. No performance. Just calculation. You caused quite a delay. I met his gaze without speaking. Silence often reveals more than arguments. He looked away first. Another small detail. Another crack. The official with the tablet suddenly stopped typing. His eyes widened. We have the destination. Every head turned toward him. Even passengers who knew none of the details leaned forward. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. He studied the screen carefully. Then he looked up. The transmission did not leave the airport. Relief moved through the group. Brief relief. Temporary relief. The official continued before anyone could celebrate. It reached another device already inside the terminal. The relief disappeared instantly. The operation was not finished. Not even close. The lead officer rubbed his forehead. Can we identify it? Working on it. The suited man looked toward me. Agent Brooks, if the distraction had not happened, would the transmission still have gone out? The question lingered. Captain Hale heard it. Lena heard it. Everyone nearby heard it. I considered the answer carefully. Then I nodded once. Probably not. The cabin fell silent again. Hale lowered his eyes. The realization reached him at last. The torn credential had done more than embarrass someone. It had interrupted something important. Something larger than any passenger dispute. The official with the tablet received one final update. His face changed immediately. We have a location. The suited man stepped closer. Where? The official turned the screen toward him. For the first time all afternoon, genuine urgency appeared in every official face around me. Then the suited man looked toward the terminal windows and said two words nobody expected. It moved. The word "move" changed the atmosphere instantly. Every official near the aircraft door reacted. Not dramatically. Not visibly to most passengers. But I saw it. The lead officer reached for his radio. The official with the tablet turned and began typing. Rapidly. The suited man beside me stared at the screen for 2 full seconds. How far? He asked. Concourse C. The answer came immediately. Still inside the terminal. Relief flickered across several faces. Brief relief. The target had not disappeared completely. Yet every minute mattered now. The passenger beside the searched bag lowered his eyes. He heard the exchange. He understood exactly what it meant. A small piece of his confidence returned. That worried me. People only regain confidence when they believe something is still working. Another mini-hook settled into place. Whatever had been transmitted had already reached someone else. Outside the aircraft window, sunlight reflected off a service truck moving across the ramp. Everything beyond the glass looked ordinary. Inside felt nothing like ordinary. The official with the tablet received another update. The signal is moving toward the east connector. The suited man nodded once. Send the team. Several personnel near the jet bridge immediately stepped away. Quiet. Efficient. No speeches. No drama. Just movement. Lena watched them disappear into the terminal. She looked exhausted. The tablet remained pressed against her chest. Captain Hale noticed her expression. He opened his mouth as if to say something. Then stopped. He had finally learned the value of silence. The lead officer approached the passenger from row 8. We are going to continue this conversation elsewhere. The man smiled faintly. I assumed so. His voice carried no panic. No anger. That bothered me. Calm can be dangerous when someone believes they still hold an advantage. The businessman across the aisle noticed it too. He shifted uneasily in his seat. The cabin air felt colder now. The smell of coffee had faded. Only the faint scent of jet fuel drifted through the open aircraft door. The suited man beside me glanced toward the cockpit. Then toward me. Agent Brooks. Yes. When the credential was destroyed, how long was your attention diverted? I knew why he was asking. About 3 minutes. He nodded. 3 minutes. Long enough for confusion. Long enough for mistakes. Long enough for a hidden phone to transmit a message. Captain Hale lowered his eyes again. The realization struck him harder every time the timeline resurfaced. Nobody blamed him out loud. Nobody needed to. The facts were doing that work already. Another notification appeared on the tablet. The official read it. His expression changed immediately. They found the receiver. Every conversation stopped. Even the passengers felt the shift. The suited man stepped closer. Status? Recovered. Relief moved through the group again. This time it lasted longer. The official continued reading. Then his expression tightened. There is more. Of course there was. There always is. He looked up. The receiver belonged to an airport contractor with valid credentials. Silence followed. That changed everything. The problem was larger than one passenger. Larger than one aircraft. Larger than a single transmission. The lead officer exhaled slowly. How deep? The official shook his head. Unknown. Nobody liked that answer. The passenger from row 8 looked away for the first time. Just briefly. Enough. The suited man saw it. So did I. Another crack. Another piece falling into place. Outside, additional airport vehicles appeared near the terminal windows. The response was expanding. The operation had moved beyond this aircraft now. Yet the beginning of it all remained here. First class. A torn credential. A delayed departure. A moment of arrogance that interrupted something important. Lena finally spoke. Softly. So this was never about a seat. Nobody answered her. Nobody had to. The truth was sitting in plain sight. The official with the tablet received one final message and looked directly at me. Agent Brooks, he said quietly. The people at headquarters want to speak with you immediately. The request from headquarters changed the room in a way nothing else had. Not because it was loud. Because everyone understood what it meant. The officials exchanged quick looks. The lead officer stepped aside immediately. Even the suited man beside me straightened his posture. Headquarters did not interrupt active operations without a reason. I rose from seat 3A for the first time since the credential had been torn apart. The leather seat released a soft creak. Small sound. Big moment. Several passengers watched me stand. Their expressions had changed completely from when I boarded. Curiosity had become respect. Lena noticed it too. She lowered her eyes for a second and exhaled slowly. The official handed me a secure phone. They are waiting. I accepted it and moved a few steps toward the open cockpit area. The aircraft felt different standing up. Narrower. More crowded. More real. I placed the phone against my ear. Brooks. The voice on the other end answered immediately. Calm. Direct. Good work. No wasted words. No dramatic praise. Just acknowledgement. The kind professionals value most. I listened carefully as information came through. The recovered receiver in the terminal had already led investigators toward additional contacts. The transmission had not completed fully. Critical portions were missing. That mattered. A lot. Another mini-hook settled into place. The damage had not been as severe as everyone feared. Headquarters continued. Your interruption may have exposed the operation, but it also accelerated identification. I glanced toward the passenger from row 8. He sat quietly now. Listening without appearing to listen. Understood, I said. What is my priority? The answer came instantly. Finish the flight incident. Preserve the witnesses. Preserve the timeline. My eyes moved toward Captain Hale. He stood near the cockpit door, shoulders lower than before. Not defeated. Reflective. The call ended. I handed the phone back. The suited man stepped closer. Well? The operation continues. Relief crossed several faces. Not celebration. Relief. There is a difference. The official with the tablet smiled for the first time all afternoon. Very briefly. Then he returned to work. The lead officer escorted the passenger farther forward. Quietly. Respectfully. Professionally. No raised voices. No spectacle. Most passengers never even understood the details. They only understood that something important had happened. Captain Hale finally approached me. Slowly. Careful steps. Gone was the certainty from earlier. Gone was the irritation. The smell of coffee still lingered faintly on his uniform jacket. He looked older than he had an hour ago. Stress does that. Agent Brooks, he said. The title sounded strange coming from him. Honest. Uncomfortable. Necessary. I waited. He looked at the floor briefly. Then back at me. I made assumptions. The cabin became very quiet again. Lena stopped moving entirely. The businessman across the aisle lowered his gaze. Nobody wanted to interrupt. Hale swallowed. I should have verified before acting. Simple words. No excuses. No attempt to shift blame. Just accountability. That mattered more than he realized. I nodded once. Yes. The answer was not cruel. It was true. He accepted it. Another small silence followed. Then Lena stepped forward and offered a faint smile. The first genuine smile anyone had worn all day. I think everyone learned something, she said softly. Nobody argued. Outside the windows, the afternoon sun stretched across the terminal glass. Ground crews continued their routines. Travelers hurried through distant corridors. Life moved forward. Yet inside this aircraft, something had changed. Not only the operation. Not only the investigation. People. Perceptions. Assumptions. The suited man checked his watch and looked toward the aircraft door. Then he received one final message and his expression shifted again. We have another update, he said quietly. The update arrived quietly. Yet it changed everything. The suited man lowered his phone and looked around the cabin. For the first time all afternoon, there was something close to relief in his eyes. Not victory. Relief. The kind that comes when uncertainty finally begins to shrink. The terminal team completed the sweep, he said. Several officials immediately focused on him. The lead officer paused beside the aircraft door. Lena stepped closer. Even Captain Hale looked up. And, the official with the tablet asked. The suited man nodded. The receiver was recovered before any secondary transfer occurred. A wave of silence moved through the aircraft. Then came a collective exhale. Small. Human. Real. Nobody celebrated. Professionals rarely do. But shoulders relaxed. Tension loosened. The pressure that had filled the cabin for hours finally began to fade. Another mini hook lingered beneath the relief. There was still unfinished business on board. The passenger from row 8 sat quietly under observation. His eyes remained fixed on the floor. Whatever confidence he had carried earlier was gone now. Completely gone. The official with the tablet reviewed the latest reports. The chain stops there, he said. No additional receivers. The lead officer nodded. Good. One simple word. Heavy with meaning. Outside the aircraft windows, the afternoon light had softened into gold. Long reflections stretched across the terminal glass. Ground crews continued their work. Baggage carts moved slowly across the ramp. The world outside never knew how close this day had come to unfolding differently. Captain Hale remained standing near me. He seemed unsure whether to stay or leave. Finally he spoke. "The flight can depart once we receive clearance." His voice sounded different now. Less authority. More humility. Lena offered him a small nod. He appreciated it more than she realized. The businessman across the aisle quietly returned to his seat. The excitement was ending. Reality was returning. Yet nobody on board would forget what happened here. Not after everything they had witnessed. The suited man approached me again. Headquarters reviewed the timeline. I listened. They specifically noted your decision to remain on board after the credential incident. I smiled faintly. Leaving would have been easier. Yes, he said. That is why it mattered. The words hung in the air. Not dramatic. Just true. Another mini hook appeared in a different form now. Reflection instead of tension. Sometimes the most important moments arrive after the crisis. Lena glanced toward the remains of the damaged credential still sealed inside an evidence envelope. Such a small object. Such a large consequence. Captain Hale followed her gaze. He saw it too. The physical reminder of a choice made too quickly. A judgment formed too easily. He stepped forward. Slowly. "Agent Brooks." I turned toward him. He held my gaze this time. No hesitation. No defensiveness. "I owe you an apology." The cabin became quiet once more. Not uncomfortable quiet. Honest quiet. He continued. "I looked at you and decided who you were before I asked a single question." Nobody interrupted. Nobody needed to. He had already said the hardest part. I nodded once. "Thank you." That was enough. No lecture. No humiliation. No revenge. Just acknowledgement. The kind that allows people to move forward. Lena smiled again. The official with the tablet smiled too. Even the lead officer seemed relieved. Accountability closes doors that arguments never can. Outside, the jet bridge crew finally received a signal. Activity resumed near the aircraft entrance. Passengers began collecting belongings. The day was moving again. Forward at last. Yet as the cabin slowly returned to normal, one final announcement arrived through the lead officer's earpiece. He listened carefully. Then a small smile crossed his face. "You should hear this." The lead officer listened to the message for several seconds before removing his earpiece. The small smile remained. Not large. Not dramatic. Just genuine. After everything that had happened, that alone caught everyone's attention. The suited man raised an eyebrow. "Good news?" The officer nodded. "Very good news." Even the passengers nearby seemed curious now. The tension that had dominated the aircraft for hours had finally loosened enough for people to breathe normally again. The late afternoon sunlight poured through the windows, painting warm gold across the first-class cabin. The atmosphere felt completely different from when the day began. The officer looked directly at me. The recovered receiver helped identify 3 additional connections. He paused. All of them were already under observation. Relief moved through the group. Real relief this time. Not temporary. Not cautious. Real. The official with the tablet lowered his shoulders for the first time all afternoon. "So the network is contained." That is the current assessment. The answer carried weight. Months of work. Countless hours. Endless preparation. all balanced on decisions made in moments. Another mini hook appeared, but softer now. Less about danger. More about meaning. The businessman across the aisle quietly closed his laptop and smiled. That is the first good thing I have heard today. Several people laughed softly. Even Lena. The sound felt strange after so many hours of silence and tension. Yet it felt right. Human. Normal. Captain Hale remained standing near the aisle. He looked toward the windows for a moment. Then back toward me. The sunlight reflected across his uniform. He seemed different now. Not because his position had changed. Because his perspective had. "Agent Brooks," he said quietly. "I hope one day I earn back the trust one lost today." The words were simple. Honest. Nobody rushed to rescue him from them. Nobody rushed to punish him either. They simply existed. I considered them for a moment. Then I nodded. "That starts with the next person you meet." He absorbed the answer slowly. Then he smiled. Small. Humble. Real. Lena glanced between us and looked relieved. The official with the tablet closed his case. The lead officer received final confirmation from the terminal team. Operations were concluding. Reports would be written. Interviews would happen. Procedures would follow. But the crisis itself was over. Outside the aircraft, airport workers disconnected equipment from the jet bridge area. The delayed departure was finally moving forward. Passengers gathered their belongings. Conversations resumed. Phones came out. Life returned. Yet something important remained behind in that cabin. A lesson nobody could place into an evidence envelope. The torn credential still sat sealed in a clear bag. Such a small object. A few pieces of damaged plastic. Yet everyone who looked at it saw something different now. Assumptions. Consequences. Accountability. The cost of deciding who someone is before learning who they actually are. I picked up my carry-on and prepared to leave. The warm light stretched across the aisle. Dust floated through the air like tiny sparks. The aircraft no longer felt like a crime scene. It felt like an airplane again. Just an airplane. The way it should have been from the beginning. As passengers slowly exited, Lena stopped beside me. "For what it is worth," she said softly, "you stayed calm longer than anyone else." I smiled. "Part of the job." She laughed quietly. Then she disappeared into the flow of travelers. Captain Hale helped direct passengers toward the exit. This time he greeted every person who passed. Every single one. No assumptions. No shortcuts. Just respect. I watched for a moment before stepping into the fading afternoon light beyond the aircraft door. The operation would continue. Reports would be filed. Life would move forward. But some lessons travel farther than any flight ever could. And this one already had.